My name is Alan Majors. I was adopted in January of 1961 from Korea. I'm 53 years old and I was raised in eastern central Illinois outside of a small town, Ridge Farm, Illinois. Circumstances surrounding my relinquishment are that I was left on City Hall or at the police station, like so many other people were. And then my Korean name was given to me after I was relinquished. And there was no note, there was no paper, there was no name. In eastern central Illinois, it's a very white, rural, culturally and isolated area. It's homogeneous, that can be positive or not positive. It's not a very progressive area. It's not cosmopolitan at all. That said, in many respects, it was a good upbringing. I was raised on a farm. I learned many resourceful things, a work ethic, kind of a can-do attitude. You don't have what you otherwise would need. You make do and you get it done somehow. And I value that. But as far as kind of broad and deeper experiences, we traveled some, but it was very much a white, middle-class upbringing with no other people of color around. So when I was growing up, I really wasn't aware of any feelings, reflective kind of feelings or emotions around being different or being adopted, because I was so inculcated, just 100% inundated in the white culture, the white rural middle class culture where I was raised. My relationship with my parents when I was growing up was, with respect to adoption, was that I always knew I was adopted, but it was not really talked about ever. It was there, it wasn't hidden, but on the other hand, it wasn't really delved into or embraced. A few years ago, unfortunately, my father, I won't give you the greater context, but he saw fit to give me the message that I owe them for what they did for adopting me. It made me feel some anger, some resentment, but as I processed this, it was really, and this goes into where I am now, I love my parents, but it's a very difficult, painful love because it is on their terms. I started thinking about the circumstances of my being relinquished and my birth parents about 5 or so years ago. The emotions that have been brought up from me delving into my adoptee background and the possibility of maybe locating birth parents and so on has really created some tension in my life. But it's something that let me be clear, it's not pleasant at all a lot of times, but it's something I really welcome because for me, it's a part of who I am, it's a reality, and I embrace that even in the face of the tension. I was adopted in January of 1961. I went back for the first time in the summer of 2009. I was 49 years old. I had been in the United States for 48 years. So I'm kind of a little later than many people to the getting involved in the adoptee community and getting involved in exploring birth certs and so on. My experience going back to Korea for the first time in 2009 was, it's difficult for me to put into words, but there are these thoughts that come to mind. I love the saying, it's such a powerful validation to be around people that look like you, to have faces that are similar. So there was that, and I couldn't help, and I think this is true of a lot of other people, you can't help but wonder about the life that might have been. Now, I don't necessarily spend a lot of time and energy on that, but on the other hand, it bumps up against where you are, the life you have. So there's that, and making new friends and being part of the adoptee community. In many respects, it's very much like a second family. Adoption is a loss, and it is a tremendous loss. Being back in Korea opened the door to the room in me that could begin to explore that. And it wasn't really so much a rush, but it was just the first step in a journey that I'm still very much continuing to this day. Every time I come back from Korea, it's difficult. And I'm not sure why, but this time it's been more difficult than the other two times. Coming back from Korea to the United States, where I've lived pretty much my whole life, there are different kinds of connections. So the connections I have here, on the one hand, are comfortable, they're familiar. I can, with respect to what I understand of the language, English, and being raised white middle class, I can move pretty well in that arena. All of that said, it's not the same kind of a connection as someone who looks like you. That is a powerful validation. Or someone that you share a culture with, even if sharing that culture is at the very beginning stages, it's not the same. So the connections that I make in Korea are different. I won't say they're necessarily deeper, but they are very different than the connections here. They have a different kind of relevance for me, and probably that goes to where I am in my identity and seeking more about my birth family and so on. So with respect to my finding birth family, I have to be realistic about that. The records, to be kind, are sketchy, and it was a long time ago. It was a very long time ago. So I'm hopeful, but not very optimistic. There are dates on my Holt records that are obviously not correct, because the date I was processed in some of my paperwork is earlier than my birth date on my papers. So something, doesn't add up there. When I was there in 2009, I went on YTN and did one of those 90-second spots to seek to avail myself to someone who might recognize me. But again, I'm not the same person I was when I was 14 months old. And I also did a short interview for Korean Guidepost magazine, and they did a little one-page kind of a public service announcement appeal. I didn't hear anything from that. This past summer, I went to the police department. There's a department or officer that deals with missing persons, and so I talked with them. I did a DNA swab. They copied the paperwork I have, so that's kind of in the pipeline. But again, I'm realistic about the chances with that too. I never really felt before I went back to Korea that I was missing anything and that I was incomplete, though now, as I go back, there's this kind of sense of looking back of I didn't know what I didn't know. So I never felt back then I was missing anything, and now I still don't think in those terms. I think of looking ahead, more what I can explore and experience and become. So if I was going to make a comment to other adoptees, I would say if you have any inkling at all, any inclination to explore that aspect of who you are, I would strongly encourage you to do it, to join the adoptee community. Considering going back to Korea, I think your life will be deeper and richer because of it. If you don't choose to do that, I respect that. I understand that too. I will say I think you're missing out, though. More directly, I think you're doing yourself a disservice, even, I would say. To adoptive parents, as it turns out, I've had occasion to have quite a few conversations with adoptive parents. And there are some non-white adoptive parents, but the vast majority of the adoptive parents are white. So I tell adoptive parents, because I'm always asked, what would you tell us? What advice can you give us? And I say, explore whiteness. Explore what it means to be white, to always be on the inside, to have that privilege. The analogy I like is that fish don't understand, they swim in water. It just is. It's there all the time. As an adoptee, being a person of color, in many respects, you're always on the outside looking in. And so I encourage white adoptive parents to explore the privilege of whiteness and to try to understand more what it's like to be on the outside looking in, to not have that privilege. Because otherwise you're able to take so many things for granted. That being a person of color, being a person of color in a family where you don't look like everyone else, you're not afforded the luxury of taking those things for granted. Adoption means to me, it's just the life I have. It's a different life. I'm not saying it's better. I'm not saying it's worse. I don't necessarily feel indebted to my adoptive parents, though in many respects I am grateful. I don't feel anger or blame or bitterness toward the people that relinquished me. At this point, absent further information, I choose to believe that they did the best they could, and they had their valid reasons for doing so. With respect to adoption, we never know the path we didn't take. I don't know what my life would have been otherwise. All I know is the life I've lived. There are many good things about the life I've lived. Life being what it is, there are many challenges, just like everyone else.